Single mom janitor fixed $1 million glitch. What the CEO did next shocked the whole company. Stay with me till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far the truth really spreads. Eva Martinez didn't mean to hear anything. She just pushed her cleaning cart through the hallway like she did every night, eyes low, steps soft. The boardroom door had been left open, a rare thing in a company that guarded its secrets tighter than its stock price. Inside, voices collided like thunder. Charts lit up the giant screen at the far end of the room. Equations scrawled across the whiteboard stood like monuments of confusion. They were arguing about an AI model failure, something catastrophic, millions on the line. Eva stepped inside, broom in hand, invisible as usual. No one looked up. She moved toward the far corner, pretending not to listen, but she couldn't help it. Numbers had always been her language, and this particular one, a variable misused in a recursive loop, burned like a typo in a love letter. Her eyes lingered on a formula just long enough, and then barely louder than a breath she spoke. That function shouldn't be nested. You're feeding the output back into itself. That's why it's spiking. No one responded. They hadn't even heard her. But Daniel Carter had. He stood just outside the glass wall, coffee gone cold in his hand, watching her not just clean, but correct the very foundation of his company's failing code. Eva blinked, startled by her own voice, then hurried to the corner, wiping the edge of the table. She didn't know what made her speak. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was something deeper. She kept her head down, finished the floor in silence, and disappeared into the dark hallway like nothing had happened. But Daniel didn't move for a long time. Eva Martinez had just finished running simulations on a deep learning sequence when her phone buzzed on the lab desk. It was almost midnight. Her husband never texted her that late. The message wasn't from him. It was a photo, blurry, taken through a window. A man, his shoulders, his walk unmistakably Mark, and a woman laughing against his chest. Eva stared at it for a full minute, her hands frozen above the keyboard. A second message followed, no words, just one line. Thought you should know. She didn't cry. She just stood, walked out of the lab without shutting down her terminal. Her badge beeped against the exit sensor like nothing had happened. Back home, the lights were off, but his car was there. She walked in silent. Her shoes left prints on the wooden floor. In the kitchen, a wine glass still half full. On the table, 2 plates, hers untouched, his used, and one more, lipstick on the edge. Upstairs, she found him in the guest room still buttoning his shirt. He didn't flinch, didn't lie. He just looked at her and said, "I waited. For years. I waited for you to look up from your screen. I wanted to matter." She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She looked at the man she once built dreams with and felt nothing but cold, clinical silence. The next morning, she sent one email, resignation, no reason, no press release, no fight. She turned her back on the career that once defined her. Because somewhere along the climb to brilliance, she had missed the cliff she was already falling off. And when she found herself staring into her daughter's ultrasound picture that same evening, she whispered, "This time I won't miss it." He didn't yell. He didn't leave a note. Just quietly folded his clothes into a suitcase, while Eva sat on the edge of the bed, 6 months pregnant, trying not to shake. She asked him where he was going. He didn't answer. He zipped the bag, grabbed his keys, and walked out. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut like a sentence ending. The silence after that was louder than any goodbye. Eva gave birth alone. No one waited outside the delivery room. She held her daughter for the first time in a hospital gown still damp with sweat and fear. Her arms trembled from the epidural, but she didn't let go. She whispered her daughter's name, Mia, over and over like a spell that might keep the world from falling apart. They sent her home 2 days later in a cab. The apartment smelled like the same silence he left behind. The plants were dying. The bills were piled on the kitchen counter. Her inbox was full of unread messages, job offers, project invitations, former colleagues reaching out. She never opened them. People stopped calling after a while. Even the one she once mentored, who used to call her a genius, slowly disappeared. Her world shrank to a crib, a bottle, and a clock that never seemed to move. She learned how to change diapers with one hand and heat formula with the other, slept in 2-hour stretches, ate whatever was close enough to reach, cried quietly in the bathroom when Mia finally fell asleep. No one saw Eva the expert anymore. No one called her brilliant. They just saw a woman with tired eyes and baby spit on her shirt. But every night as she watched Mia's chest rise and fall, she knew one thing for sure. She was still here. Eva didn't vanish. She just stopped answering. Recruiters called with offers she would have once stayed up all night chasing. A keynote invitation from Berlin, a research grant from Stanford. Old colleagues reached out their messages full of nostalgia and disbelief. They said she was wasting herself. She didn't argue. She simply let the messages go unread. Her world had narrowed to something simpler. Mornings began with sticky fingers and spilled cereal. Afternoons were walks to the park lullabies, sung half awake and folding tiny clothes with one hand while holding Mia in the other. And when the sun fell, Eva changed into a dark polo, tied her hair up, and walked into a tech firm downtown, not as an engineer, but as the woman who emptied the trash cans and mopped the glass walls. Each hallway echoed with a life she once knew, offices named after visionaries, posters of breakthroughs she once helped pioneer. Every now and then she'd spot a paper with algorithms scribbled across it. The math still made perfect sense to her, but she never lingered. She pushed her cart past it all, past the labs, past the brainstorming rooms, past the dreams she used to chase like oxygen. Her hands, once trained to write code that learned on its own, now wiped fingerprints off screens she would have designed. But she didn't feel bitter. There was no anger, no longing, just a quiet belief that her place in that world had expired. She hadn't been pushed out. She stepped away as if trying to balance the scales. At night, she'd return home just as Mia stirred in her crib, and before slipping off her shoes, she'd press a soft kiss to her daughter's forehead, whispering a promise no one else could hear. That no algorithm, no career, no amount of brilliance was worth more than this. Eva didn't offer advice. She only stepped in when someone looked truly lost, like the intern who had been staring at the same 5 lines of code for 3 nights, rewriting the same loop with no success. On her break, Eva passed by and paused just long enough to glance at the screen. She leaned in slightly and murmured something almost too soft to hear. Why was he calling the function inside itself, without an exit condition? He blinked, startled. When he looked up, Eva was already walking away. The next day, he opened his terminal to a new folder someone had left on his desktop. It was named EM97 Help. Inside, a commented breakdown of the issue annotated in a teaching tone that felt oddly familiar. One line stood out at the bottom, "Don't complicate what was born simple." He looked around the room, then back at the file. The initials hit him. And somehow he knew whoever left it had once written like this, not to prove anything, but to remind people why they loved building in the first place. Eva didn't wait for thanks. She kept cleaning. Sometimes she wiped a board clean but left one corner untouched. A correction, a comment, a better way to write the loop. Little breadcrumbs that pointed to someone who not only understood the system, but thought like it. Daniel Carter noticed. He was walking by a glass room late one night when he heard someone explain the concept of dynamic weights in neural nets with stunning ease. It wasn't a presentation, just a janitor talking softly to an intern on the verge of quitting. Her words stopped him cold. They sounded familiar, not just in logic but in rhythm. Years ago at a summit in Tokyo, a speaker had said, "Code should learn the way people do with mistakes, not perfection." He remembered the applause. The woman had spoken with quiet fire. He never forgot the quote. He didn't know until now he had just heard it again, from the mouth of someone who was supposed to be invisible. The room went silent when she walked in. Not the kind of silence that welcomes, the kind that weighs heavy with judgment. Eva stood near the door, still in uniform. Her hands fidgeted at her sides. Every head in the room turned. Engineers in button-downs and expensive watches. One of them leaned back, arms crossed, and smirked. They said she had found the flaw in the AI engine, fixed something no one else could, but now they wanted to see for themselves. Or maybe they just wanted to watch her fail. The lead engineer scoffed, asked if she had credentials, wondered if her fix was a fluke, called her lucky, then added loud enough for everyone to hear that janitors should stick to mops. Eva's throat tightened, her cheeks burned, but she didn't move. Daniel stood beside her silent, watching, testing. She walked to the whiteboard slowly, picked up a marker. Her hand trembled just slightly before she touched it to the surface. Then she drew. 3 lines, 1 function, 1 missing conditional. Her voice came out quiet but steady. She didn't talk about degrees or resumes. She talked about the problem. Explained the runaway feedback loop that had been destabilizing the neural weight distribution. Pointed out where the existing code treated edge cases as general patterns. The engineer who laughed stared at the board, blinked. No one spoke. Eva stepped back, capped the marker, let the silence speak for her. She didn't need them to like her. She didn't even need them to believe her. She just needed them to see what was real. And now they did. That night, the office emptied early, but Daniel stayed. The hum of the vending machine in the break room was the only sound left. He didn't go back to his desk. He walked the hallway slowly past the whiteboard Eva had written on. The room still smelled like dry erase marker and tension. But in his mind, something else echoed not the silence of the engineers, but the clarity in Eva's voice. There was something hauntingly familiar about the way she spoke, and that's when the memories started to return. Years ago, at a summit in Tokyo, a young speaker had stood in front of a packed auditorium and said something that silenced the room. She said code should learn like people do, not through perfection, but through failure. The phrasing was raw, honest. Daniel had written it down in the corner of his notebook and underlined it twice. He carried that quote for years, not just as inspiration, but as a reminder of why he built what he built. And tonight, he heard it again. Eva didn't say it like she was quoting anyone. She said it like it belonged to her. Daniel felt the air shift. He didn't move, just watched her from behind the glass, realizing he wasn't just looking at someone with talent. He was looking at the very woman whose voice had lit the path he'd walked for a decade. The janitor, the ghost in the hallways. She wasn't forgotten. She had simply stepped out of the spotlight, and now she was quietly helping a company she once unknowingly helped build one broken piece at a time. It started with a question no one had time to ask. One of the junior engineers, curious and a little restless, decided to trace the architecture of their AI system, not just the surface, deep into the engine, line by line. He noticed something strange, a foundational module that didn't match the rest of the company's code style. It was cleaner, more intuitive, like someone had written it with a kind of instinct that couldn't be taught. At the bottom of the file, barely noticeable, were the initials EM97. He almost didn't think twice, but something made him search it. He dug into old archives, stale conference papers, a preprint published over a decade ago, and there she was, Eva Martinez. He stared at the screen, breath held. The janitor, the ghost in the hallways, the mind behind the code that now powered everything they built. He didn't speak right away, just walked the quiet hallway to the top floor, knocked once. Daniel looked up. The junior engineer turned the laptop around, said nothing. Let the screen speak. Daniel stepped closer, slowly. His eyes scanned the lines, then the metadata, then the citation on the archived paper. He didn't react. Not with surprise, not with shock, but with stillness. The room felt sacred, because now everything made sense. Her quiet confidence, the way she solved problems without needing to be seen, the way her hands moved across a board like the ideas already lived in her skin. They hadn't just hired a janitor. They had been cleaning their offices beside the very mind that laid the foundation for their success. Daniel closed the laptop gently. He didn't say much, just stood for a long time, not thinking, not strategizing, just honoring. Daniel made the offer without pressure. A position, a title, a chance to shape something no one had ever built before. He told her the team needed her vision, that the future of the company could rest on her insight. Eva listened. then looked away, not because she was unsure of the work, but because she wasn't sure she belonged in that world anymore. She walked home in silence that night. The weight of possibility tugged at her, but she pushed it back. That life had cost her too much. Glory wasn't enough. Later, while brushing her daughter's hair, Mia asked her the question. Soft, innocent, but sharp like glass. If you don't go back, is it because you're scared? Or is it because of someone who once made you feel small? Eva didn't answer, not then. She lay awake long after Mia had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the paint. It wasn't about redemption or ego. It was about showing her daughter that silence doesn't mean surrender, that walking away is different from giving up. The next morning, she pressed her ID badge to the glass door again. This time, she didn't flinch when it clicked open. She walked into the building as herself. No mop, no mask. Daniel waited near the elevator. He didn't ask anything, just nodded once. Eva nodded back. She wasn't returning to reclaim something lost. She was here to build what came next. The morning was quiet. Sunlight spilled across the table, catching the edge of the syrup bottle. Eva sat with Mia in her lap, helping her cut a piece of pancake, while Daniel poured coffee into chipped mugs. It felt like a morning they had earned. No noise, no titles, just peace and soft laughter between bites. For the first time in years, Eva's shoulders weren't tight with regret. Daniel reached into his bag and slid a folder across the table. No words, just a look. Eva opened it slowly. Inside sketches of a new program, a platform to teach kids how to code through characters and stories. The name on the front, Mia's Mind. Eva didn't cry because it was genius. She cried because it saw her, not the scientist, not the failure, just a mother who once chose love over legacy and finally found both. Mia leaned against her chest, sticky fingers brushing her hand. Eva looked out the window. The trees moved gently like nothing needed to rush anymore. She squeezed her daughter's hand, breathed in deeply, and said it quietly. I couldn't save what I lost, but I'll build what comes next. Sometimes we hear a story, and something in us stirs. Maybe it reminds you of someone you love. Maybe it reminds you of you. If you've ever carried too much alone or been judged for surviving, your voice belongs here too. This space was made for stories that aren't often told, for people who feel invisible but never stop trying. Tell us what part of her story felt real to you, or share your own if you're ready. Someone out there needs to hear it. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.